Hello everyone, and thank you for attending today's webinar, B2B 5G, Lessons Learned from Huawei's Path to Monetization, brought to you by Huawei. Before we begin, I will cover a few housekeeping items. On the left-hand side of your screen is the Q&A. If you have any questions during the webcast, please type your questions into the Q&A box and submit your questions to our speakers. All questions will be saved. If we don't get to answer you, we may follow up via email. At the bottom of your audience console are multiple application widgets you can use. If you have any technical difficulties, please click on the yellow help widget. Here you can find answers to common questions. Near the end of today's presentation, please take 1 minute to complete the survey that's open on the screen. Your feedback is extremely helpful. An on-demand version of the webcast will be available about 1 day after the event and can be accessed using the same audience link that was sent to you earlier today. I would now like to turn the event over to Omdia's Research VP, Telco and Service Provider, Evan Kirkheimer.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening, and good morning. As Sam said, I'm Evan Kirkheimer. I'm the Vice President of Research and Analysis for Omdia's Service Provider. And I'd like to kind of introduce the theme of this webinar, which is Lessons Learned from Huawei's Path to Monetization for B2B 5G. So many of us follow Huawei and the industry at large. And you'll know, especially based on Huawei's recent annual financial report, that it's invested heavily in R&D and developed partnerships around the world to focus on new business lines leveraging what it terms 5G to be capabilities in major industries. And those industries includes ports, mining, roads, healthcare, farming, and others. Those of us based not in China also know that many CSPs are pinning their hopes on B2B services, including private 5G and public 5G for business. But there aren't that many examples yet of monetizing these services at scale. However, Huawei's operator partners are already, in some cases, monetizing 5G and making some interesting and significant inroads into the enterprise sector. So the point of this discussion really is to explore the detail of exactly how Huawei has helped CSPs monetize enterprise connectivity and what kind of business cases can be built on this, and how the lessons learned from Huawei and its existing CSP partners can be globalized to other operators, and also what impact this will have on the economy, and what's the role of next-gen access in industry as a whole. So with that, I'd like to ask my panelists to introduce themselves. So we've got a great set of panelists, but they're best speaking for themselves. So I'd like to hand over first to Shirley. Shirley, please go ahead.
Thank you, Evan. My name is Shirley Ziyu. I'm an economist and professor focused on Chinese tech economy and techno geopolitics. I'm also a member of the World Economic Forum expert network on China, 5G, and geoeconomics. It's a great pleasure to be here.
Thank you. Mohammed, would you like to introduce yourself next?
Sure, thanks, Evan. Hello, everybody. My name is Mohammed, and I'm a VP of Marketing and Solution Sales Department of Carrier Network Business Group in Huawei. My focus is generally on ICT technologies and business, specifically in industry digitalization. And I'm here joining the webinar from Shenzhen, the home of Huawei headquarters. So happy to be here.
Thank you, Mohammed. Andy, I think you're up next.
Thank you. I'm Andy Purdy. I'm Huawei's Chief Security Officer in the United States, and it's a real pleasure to be with you today.
And last but certainly not least, Mr. Will Townsend, my analyst peer. Will, please go ahead.
Thank you, Evan. Hi, I'm Will Townsend. I'm the Vice President and Principal Analyst for Networking and Security at More Insights and Strategy. Been managing the practices for about 7 years now. Prior to becoming an analyst, I spent 30 years in corporate America in various sales, marketing, and channel roles. I'm also recognized as a global top 100 analyst as tracked by AR Insights, and it's a pleasure to be participating in the webinar today.
Well, thank you, Will, and thank you to all my panelists for introducing yourselves. in the audience, as you can see, it's a nice array of skills and backgrounds here in the panel. And before we dig into kind of Huawei and specific applications and industries in terms of B2B 5G, I wanted to take some time discussing with Shirley kind of the larger economic and industry context of 5G. And Shirley, I know in our discussions before this live webinar that you focused a lot of your recent professional career and your academic research on the impact of 5G on kind of national, regional, and global economies. And it would be a pleasure and an honor for us to share your thoughts on, global projections of revenue and GDP growth for 5G, in what areas, and also how you think global progress is shaping up so far and moving in that direction in terms of 5G market penetration, revenue growth, and its potential to digitize economies. Please go ahead, Shirley.
Thank you so much, Evan, first of all, in prioritizing females' role in this panel discussion. I know we talked so intensely over the past years over 5G, particularly involving Chinese telecom carriers. We tend to forget how recent this whole 5G global phenomenon has been. 5G's commercialization really commenced in 2019-ish. Roughly about a year before the onset of COVID. And so now, just right after this post-COVID world, we are reflecting upon how much has transformed the world despite all the global economic shocks. So in the consumer space, we have just crossed the billion user mark globally. China currently has the highest market penetration rate in terms of 5G at roughly over 30%. The U.S. trails by a margin as the market with the second highest market penetration rate at about 13%. But these data that we have referred to do not include IoTs, Internet of Things. In other words, equipping machines with 5G. This is truly an industry game changer. When machines are able to operate on an automation basis powered by 5G, when machines can talk with one another with essentially zero human intervention, I think it really brings the world closer to the birth of the fourth industrial revolution. And so in terms of the 5G in the enterprise environment, this is even more nascent than compared to the consumer market. The global revenue for 5G applications in the enterprise market ranked roughly about, or was valued at roughly about $100 billion in 2022. So if we were to compare it to the global GDP size, at roughly about $100 trillion in 2022. So this is really a fraction of 1% of the total global output. It's negligible, but I think it'll be wrong if we neglect it. Imagine electricity at the turn of the 20th century. Today, also imagine a commercial enterprise that can operate on the basis of using no electricity. So we can hardly imagine these scenarios. So I think the 5G application will have that foundational power, just like electricity for future industrial scaling. Therefore, we cannot think of 5G business operation as purely commercial enterprises like Amazon or BP, for example. At some point, 5G begins to adopt characterization as a global public goods service provider. And so I think that's why governments, both in the developed and developing worlds, really ought to deliver telecom solutions as a quintessential part of national strategy.
Just building on that a little bit, Shirley, you mentioned governments in the developed and developing worlds. And as I mentioned, I may not have mentioned yet, but I know that you've done some significant work in Africa. I've been to Africa about 6 or 7 times just in telco-related jobs, and I find it such a fascinating region with so much potential. Could you explain a little bit about what you think, the implications are for both China but also Africa of 5G?
I would like to. I absolutely agree with that characterization of Africa that you have portrayed, Evan. And I would like to focus on Africa solely as a rising global economic power, possibly in the 22nd century. And needless to say, I have a huge passion and a sense of optimism for Africa. Africa's development and economic catch-up experience, in a way, is long overdue. The African colleagues over the years told me that Africa wants to play not only catch-up, but they want to lead in the fourth industrial revolution. As a matter of fact, the government of Rwanda established a fourth industrial revolution research center with the World Economic Forum a couple of years ago. So all of this speaks to the aspirations from Africa to seize the digital opportunity in the current wave of global industrial revolution. But I don't think people truly appreciate the size of Africa. Africa's landmass is enough to put the United States, China, India, Mexico, Japan, and most of the European countries geographically combined to power such a huge continental landmass with digitization, innovation. Africa needs large-scale and robust telecom solutions that adapts to the local reality. And the other dynamic that we perhaps don't fully appreciate is Africa's demographics. Africa by 2050 is projected to have 25% of the world's population. And by the end of this century, 40% of the global population will reside in Africa. And not only is just the simple demographic numbers, the median age in Africa today, in sub-Saharan Africa, is 19.8 years old. This is a super young population, ideal for the rise of the digital economy. So the future economic model cannot simply rely on extracting natural resources or primary goods production. So Africa must seize the opportunity of digitization. Now, with the geography and the demographics in mind, we also have to recognize that Africa currently has the world's lowest internet penetration rate, and also the presence of hundreds of millions of rural residents in sub-Saharan Africa. So this really demands Africa's telecom operators or infrastructure builders to be super agile, cost efficient, environmentally friendly, but also to be continental in scale. I don't think we can simply offer the opportunities for one rich African country with digital access while denying a neighboring African country who is not as wealthy. MTN, Africa, one of Africa's most robust telecom operator, had set a target of 95% broadband access for rural Africa by 2025. This is a huge target, and it would be a tremendous feat if it's accomplished. But this requires global partnerships. Africa cannot do it alone. So all industry participants have to be encouraged to hold a long view in Africa, because ultimately empowering Africa with digital access is really not about the profitability. It is about humanity.
Thanks, Shirley. And I also just highlight there's a whole lot of commercial innovation in Africa too. I mean, some of the models of providing fiber and or mobile broadband access there in terms of pricing and packaging are really unique and interesting. So there's a go-to-market element as well, which a lot of the operators are very, they've taken really innovative approaches there. And obviously vendors will need to support that and understand that as the investment piles in. But I wanted to, I mean, you've painted a very hopeful picture of 5G, and I'm an old B2B analyst, and I know Will focuses on this domain as well. And I think it's fair to say that in our trackers, our mutual firms trackers, that private 5G is often heralded as a real 5G B2B powerhouse and engine for growth, but it seems to be ramping a little bit slower than expected. So surely you referenced some industries, and Will, I'm sure you have some perspective on this. What do you think some of the mitigating factors in terms of why P5G or private 5G is just not quite taken off at the degree we expected?
Well, Evan, it's a great question. And I think there are different mitigating factors that are going on. When you look at the deployment within the enterprise, to your point, cellular is poised to move beyond just being a redundant connectivity option to being the main connectivity option, primarily in operational technology environments, manufacturing shop floors. I know we're going to talk about other use cases as well. But the challenge is that this is new for enterprises. This is not Wi-Fi. This is licensed spectrum. In the US, there's been a lot of effort around CBRS through OnGo to democratize access to licensed spectrum. There are other parts of the world that are not quite there yet, so that's sort of the first step as a mitigating factor. The second is really just the route to get there. There are many different options. So we are seeing as a service offerings from traditional cellular infrastructure providers as well as new entrants. We're seeing 5G in a box as well that involves on-prem core and RAN. So with all these different routes to market, given the fact that cellular is something new as the primary connectivity option, enterprises are pausing, they're evaluating. We are seeing some pockets of success in the US with mobile network operators like AT&T with General Motors with their factory of the future. But here's the challenge within the public network realm. We have this new thing with 5G called non-standalone and standalone. And I know we're going to get into this a little more deeply as we get through the webinar, but at a high level, you need to have a standalone deployed public network to do network slicing, which is going to allow the mobile network operators like the AT&Ts, like the China Telecoms of the world, to monetize that, to deliver an SLA for robotic tactile control or whatever that use case is. So, from my perspective, you've got all of these challenges that are affecting it, and we have to also remember too that, and I remember talking to a Wall Street Journal analyst about this. 5G is not a light switch; it's a journey, and so it takes time. And if we look at the other Gs of the past, these are about a decade in existence, and Shirley very accurately pointed out, we just started this journey in 2019. I do believe the hype cycle was quite high on the front end. I think some of the mobile network operators are guilty of that. But at the end of the day, and I'm a baseball fan, and I like to kind of use the baseball game analogy. We're probably in the third inning of a baseball game that's going to go into extra innings.
So I guess I would summarize by saying, Will, that I kind of think in my head in terms of market inhibitors and technology inhibitors. And I guess what you're saying is on private 5G, there's a kind of ecosystem or maybe some market inhibitors, which are lowering over time. But also, at least on public 5G for enterprise, there's also a tech inhibitor, right, which is the standalone, non-standalone distinction there that you made that we'll delve into a little deeper. Is that a pretty accurate reflection of kind of your response there?
Yeah, solid, right on.
Okay, perfect. Well, I would love to invite others on the other panelists to comment. I mean, do you guys think that given the fact that we've witnessed a little bit of a slower uptake than we expected, do you think this is primarily a market or a technology issue? Is there anyone who'd like to build out that discussion or maybe make a point that we haven't addressed yet? Open to the floor.
Yeah, I would like to add. Actually, I may disagree with you a little bit that it's a slow uptake for private 5G. Well, let me tell you. When we started, first of all, 3 years of development of 5G is actually equivalent to 5 years of development of 4G. Of course, that may be on the consumer business front, and although I'm so excited about consumer business, but let's focus on the topic of the panel, which is 5G to B. Look at those two numbers. Like only on the last year, the revenue inside China from 5G to B has almost tripled, like 2.7 times. Now, looking at overseas, and that's a great news. And according to GSA, the number of private 5G network has doubled from about 60 something to now more than 155, and the number is getting up. So not only in China but also overseas. So and from Huawei perspective, actually we've been helping our customers. I think we have more than 5,000 5G to B contracts in more than 20 industries, and you mentioned some of those, sports and mines and hospitals and smart cities, things like that. So I believe when we started, the issue was that where is the use case for 5G? What I'm seeing now in the engagement of our customers actually is the use case now is trying to find the technology to make it happen, to either enhance productivity or operational efficiency, or maybe adding more like EHS kind of a value. So the key here, I think, is that every single enterprise or industry vertical is trying to get advantage and leverage the great stage that's full of transformational technologies like 5G, AI, cloud, edge compute, you name it. So from that perspective, I think things are great.
Are wrapping.
Yeah. So I think what I wanted to end up with is that the value here we're talking about, because your question was about monetization or something, the value in the monetization model, it's like all of the stakeholders is going to benefit from that. At the beginning, maybe it is not going to be about the money. I mean, you got to invest. But later, I wanted to talk to you about different monetization models or where the money is.
Well, thanks for giving a teaser, because we will get onto that specific topic of monetization just a little bit later, Mohammed. But I'm kind of interested because you're parlaying into some of Huawei's own experience. So the next thread of this conversation I really wanted to focus on is, kind of Huawei's strategy and its experience over the last couple of years. And with the Huawei representatives on the call, hopefully we'll get kind of a unique and in-depth perspective here. So, for the benefit of the audience and those who maybe don't follow the market as closely as some of the rest of us, you may be aware that Huawei has suffered a significant drop in, a $30 billion drop actually in consumer smartphone business because of U.S. trade restrictions that have prevented the sale of 5G chips to Huawei and also limited the scope of Huawei's business in major markets, for example, in North America and much of Europe. So you guys, and you in your last call reviewing your financial performance in 2022, you've emphasized how much you've been increasing spend on research and development. In fact, it's now over 25% of revenue, and how you've worked with industry partners to enable some of the benefits in 5G in traditional industries, such as ports, mines, and medical care. And Mohammed, you referenced this great growth that you've seen in the last year in enterprise business in Huawei, I think 30%, according to the financial report. Essentially, I'd want to understand a little bit about how you achieve that specifically by focusing on industries. So before I ask you, Mohammed, I just want to sort of zoom out a little bit to Shirley to understand her perspective as an economist. What is the impact of 5G on specific industry? We've talked macro and global. We've talked Africa. Shirley, in your analysis, are there specific industries that are set to benefit or are already benefiting from 5G? Oh, Shirley, I think we can't hear you. You might be on mute.
Thank you, Evan. I think the rest of the panelists, they would have much more in-depth expertise in this particular subject on industry verticals. However, if I may, just a couple quick points. I would like to continue to use Africa as an example. I saw two most prominent features of industrial applications that are powered by telecom infrastructure solutions. One is Africa's fintech rise, and the other is Africa's rural development. When I was last in East Africa, the digital financial services were widely adopted. Lots of transactions from purchasing agricultural products to paying restaurant bills, they were actually conducted on a mobile phone. And so the fact that Africa is bypassing the commercial banking era to jump directly into the fintech era is very similar to China's past experience from 20 years in the past. It is really because of the lack of commercial banking infrastructure and the empowerment of digital financial infrastructure. So very different from the China model, however, is that the major innovators in Africa are not the social media companies like WeChat or e-commerce companies like Alibaba. It's really the local telecom operators. And so I think the telecommunications companies such as Safaricom will have a much better chance in leading Africa's fintech revolution and the digital adoption. And the other one that's mentioned from MTN's ambitious target to transform Africa's rural broadband access to 95% by 2025. So we're essentially 2 years away. Some of these rural adoptions of broadband access, the receptors, are really interesting. MTN places these essentially a tree trunk with foldable receptors and a solar panel, and that's essentially the broadband access for the local villages in Africa. And so with that, villagers immediately gained access to the outside world. They can obtain knowledge, and they also get quick access to education and virtual healthcare opportunities. And so that is truly transformative.
Thank you so much. So, I mean, Shirley, you mentioned, fintech, and in the context of rural development, you mentioned educational applications and healthcare applications. Mohammed, just to go back to you, just in terms of Huawei's specific experience, I think you have some significant experience in both manufacturing and mining. I know the latter very relevant for Africa. Mohammed, do you have any comment on kind of the Huawei solutions, applications, and approaches to those two industrial areas of manufacturing and mining?
Sure, of course, and that's the topic of the panel, actually. So, but let me first answer you. You said a comment, but you never directed a question about the report and the sanctions and stuff like that. And you already answered the question yourself when you said the sanction that affected your consumer business. So let me tell you the good news. Well, of course, our revenue is the same, but let me tell you that ICT business has grown from, compared to last year. And actually from the ICT business, about 2/3 of those from carrier network and 1/3 from enterprise business. So, basically, yes, the sanctions from US affected our consumer business, but we still have, we are leveraging all of the industry digitalization and stuff, the wave of industry digitalization and enterprise transformation in helping us, and at the same time for us helping our customers. So that's one thing. To your question about verticals, as I mentioned, there are many types of enterprises or models that will help different enterprises. And we can basically split them into 3 categories, from the easiest or the low-hanging fruit to a little bit more investment to a little bit much more investment. So going from private line, for example, when you do private line to enterprise, I think assuring the experience on that private line is kind of a good business, because when you do private line to any campus, you can convert that and enlarge the opportunity for like campus network. You can also have dedicated resources on that private line. You can have slicing on that private line. And an example for this in Germany, for example, they have a private line to construction sites. So that will bring a value, and the Huawei offered an integrated solutions when it comes to video and AI camera, video analytics, storage, and of course the connectivity. Getting a little bit more in depth, like for example, wide area private network, in which the operator will use the public resources in addressing the enterprise. For example, some of the beer factories in China, or even the oil companies in Kuwait, we help them in having the operator having a network, a part of the public network, addressing all of those oil wells in terms of the security, surveillance, or checking for employees, things like that nature. That needs a little bit more investment than the private line, but still it's easy to get. Time to market is very fast. Now, the third one, which is everybody's talking about, is the local or campus private network, which you talked about, mining, manufacturing, ports. Those requires investment, especially when it comes to putting multi-access edge compute on premise and using cloud services and develop more complicated use cases. So there are tons of models to help enterprise, and we've been doing a lot of those things globally in most of the countries. I don't want to mention the countries because I don't want to forget any of those.
Okay, well, thank you, Mohammed. I mean, you gave great perspective on your three-tiered approach there in terms of the way you see the different business 5G opportunities, and then in terms of campus-based private network, the kind of industry sensitivity that you roll out that informs your views. So it's been very helpful. But thinking a little bit about kind of Huawei's position, I wanted to broaden this out to both Andy and Will. I mean, Andy and Will went with kind of internal and external perspective to give their frank views on Huawei's position, its strategy and outlook, because obviously it's changed radically in the last couple of years due to these macro factors. So over to Andy perhaps first with his view on the inside, and then maybe Will can wrap up.
Sure, it's interesting. It's been quite a 3 years. I last left China in January of 2020 after attending the Huawei annual meeting, and I attended 3 strategy sessions from different business units. Very much a survival mode with determination. We just released our annual report for 2022, and it's clear that, as Mohammed alluded to, that our business is stabilized, operations are steady. We are now moved from crisis to regular business mode where we're emphasizing quality and performance. We have had tremendous results in enterprise, as you said, with a 30% growth in our enterprise business because of 5G to B. But it's a major effort that we've been doing is diversifying our business and our technology, and the enterprise space is particularly important. And we've been focusing on digital transformation of industries, cities, and the like, and moving toward green technology. One of the things that's really helped us in the 5G to B has been our partners. We have 5,000 industry solution partners. Mohammed mentioned 5,000 contracts. We also have 6,400 service partners. And so we have been using technology developments, and you could really see it at Mobile World Congress in Barcelona a month or so ago, where technology is helping carriers build mobile broadband networks with maximum performance and lowest total cost of ownership. And a lot of it has to do with connecting the unconnected and bringing higher quality to those who are connected and creating new business models. And we'll talk about monetization in a little while. But that has been a tremendous effort. And so research and development has helped us with the technological investment. We invested over $23 billion last year in R&D, over 25% of our revenue. And we've always had about 10% of our revenue invested in R&D, but working to create breakthroughs in new technology at the cutting edge. And you could see it everywhere, such as, developing new forms of macro base stations to support the ability of carriers to connect at quality and to be able to create greater use cases, higher use cases in doing so. Also working to do hard science research on some of the technologies that will be necessary for 5.5G and 6G, overcoming some of the limits of science, Moore's law and Shannon's limit, for example. So trying to make sure that the capability will be there as the need is seen, and we continue to move forward. So it's been an exciting time. This is a crucial year for us, and we move forward with determination.
Thank you very much, Andy. I mean, Will, did you have an external analyst perspective on Huawei and its position given the last year?
Oh, I certainly do. I mean, I've followed Huawei for many years, and I think from my perspective, what I saw that was different this year, certainly at Mobile World Congress, was Huawei's focus on, like Andy mentioned, adjacencies, like what they're doing with solar inverter technology and that sort of thing, but really a focus on business outcomes. So I think for many years, and you could say this is true of any traditional infrastructure provider, it was all about selling the core, selling the RAN, and sort of maximizing that, and then leaving it to the mobile network operators to figure out the use cases. But what I see Huawei doing with its pivot is focusing on driving outcomes. And I've used this example in other panels and in conversations with journalists, but I came away from Mobile World Congress very impressed with what Huawei has done to partner with Botswana, with the Debswana mining company. It's that joint venture between the Botswana nation and De Beers. And what Huawei has done in general, starting with LTE prior to the pandemic, and then sitting in that session at Mobile World Congress and listening to how Huawei partnered with the mining operation to take that to 5G, to introduce autonomy, improve safety, and even do things like developing a coating for smart cameras that repel dust. So, at a high level, what I'm most impressed with is Huawei's pivot, focusing on use cases and business outcomes.
Okay, so I would summarize as saying, I mean, the things that came out from both Andy and your responses are partnering, so like industry technology partners as well as service partners. And then, as you say, we'll kind of focusing on customers and the end customer result there, which have been markedly different shifts. And actually, that helps me shift to the next topic, which we've teased the audience about, which is monetization. And well, you touched on this a little bit with your last couple of sentences there. But if there's one thing I heard at MWC, well, there were a few themes that permeated through for me, but one of which was monetization, or what I call the "show me the money" kind of demand that we heard at MWC. And I think the industry is looking for concrete examples of carriers monetizing 5G to be not even necessarily at scale, although ideally at scale. The question in my mind, also as an analyst, is: has the first wave of operators deploying 5G achieved commercial success, or have global results so far been mixed? And I think the jury is out there. I don't see too many examples of large-scale commercial success in 5G, at least on the consumer side. I mean, there are some examples, but not too many. But if we think a little bit about business, I'd like to hand over to Andy again. And obviously, in your role, you've come across a number of examples that may not be public. So could you maybe go into a couple of those? I think you mentioned there are some in Italy and Germany, but I'll leave it to you to elaborate.
Sure, and I think a general benefit from 5G is going to be the increased efficiency and reduction of the carbon footprint. And carriers are seeing a reduction in their energy consumption, for example, using millisecond level intelligent power optimization and real-time resource shutdown that has reduced the power consumption for the carriers. Examples in Switzerland, China, and Spain, all significant benefits. In Italy, a carrier has leveraged 5G fixed wireless access to overcome the fact that they've got copper networks, so it provides upgrades. In Finland, the carrier launched 5G fixed wireless access to generate average revenue per user of 60% increase, where folks wanted to pay for higher service. Also in Italy, millimeter wave has brought GPS level experience that helps with network coverage and experience. In Germany, network slicing, you all talked about before. Using a public network in Germany, a dedicated 5G network slice was used to guarantee private network service performance for a railway company. In Kuwait, the problem with offshore and desert connectivity, the challenges of the carriers. So 5G helps address issues related to production safety and oil theft. So the carrier combined 5G, CCTV, and AI and integrated applications with quick service provisioning, so they could use public networks so that one base station could cover more than 20 oil wells. Germany, they're using 5G leased lines, partnering with video streaming providers to sell to sports clubs who want to have special access when their team is out of town. So AI cameras, live video streaming, training. And I'll just give one more. I mean, Mohammed mentioned the smart cities, but so in Thailand, in the healthcare area, they've helped benefit their hospitals so that the hospital can now provide 5G powered remote consultation. So they can have the doctor, in effect, directly analyze the situation of the patient so the patient can go from the ambulance directly into surgery. Medicine delivery by unmanned vehicles, remote emergency treatment in ambulances, as I said. So these applications have helped the hospital reduce costs and increase efficiency. And so they're very concrete benefits. So while we don't see widespread success yet, these user cases kind of thing that are going to resonate with carriers and with industries to realize, hey, we can make money, we can provide greater service, and we can reduce our carbon footprint.
Thank you, Annie. I like the example of the sports clubs. I mean, there are many amateur sports clubs, tens of thousands, right, with or low league level, where there's a kind of participant and fan experience element that they're not really serving, right, and that they could, and the idea that that's even though it's a micro vertical, there actually is scale there, right. Mohammed, I think you might have had a couple more that you wanted to contribute. I mean, please do so if you can.
Sure. Yeah, I guess I agree 100%. Of course, Andy and Will, they talked about the experience of the deployment of these projects. I wanted to add something about the success factor when it comes to Huawei perspective and why we do have roughly around 60% share on the global 5G to be. Beyond just as a solution and the integrated solution and also deep understanding of technology, I think the fact that we have Huawei Cloud and we put our industrial experience as application platform, as a service, benefiting our customer, I think we facilitate the more in-depth understanding of the industries on our carrier side. The ecosystem and the trying to, we have our open lab providing testing the service and certifying terminals. And that's, to be honest, the key for monetization. Now, if we go in depth about some cases, and I would like to mention two actually, manufacturing digitalization, which is basically huge money in there. However, it needs more investment, as I elaborated earlier. And maybe you will be surprised. One of the key drivers for industry digitalization for manufacturing. There are actually three. Number one of them is flexibility. There is like a manufacturer, Schneider, it's a manufacturing company in China. The key drivers for them is that they have more than, I think, 1,000 types of models. And the key challenge is they need to readjust the product line to ship their product. And normally, if everything is fixed, they need about 2 weeks to readjust the product line. Now, how can they respond on like +1 day delivery? So that was a key driver there to help this company in terms of 5G to be. The other factor, I said three-factor flexibility and also digitalization when it comes to, for example, commercial, industry digitalization itself, like, for example, operational model, connecting manufacturing, execution, subsystem. That's one key. The third one is the intelligence when it comes to quality, inspection, and machine vision. This is actually huge. Right now, it's about 20% of all of the manufacturing. They are utilizing this kind of a use case. By the way, it needs low latency and it needs also huge uplink capacity. Maybe in some cases, we've noticed up to 1 gigabit per second in the uplink because you have industrial cameras and very fast pictures on the uplink. So if you combine all of those, you will figure out that there are a lot of opportunities. However, when you talk about manufacturing digitalization and mining and ports, the initial investment is a little bit big because you need, as I said, to have campus captivated network and local on-premise edge compute. But the experience of monetization, the operator provide always optional or not optional, basic model for charging and advanced charging. Well, the basic model, maybe they charge one-time setup fee and terminals and maybe software integration and all of those things. The charging, the annual charging or license would be on connectivity, like the volume of the data that passes on the MEC. So there are very flexible ways to monetize, and also the enterprise are asking for not paying per product, but they wanted to pay as you grow or pay as you use. So there are many of those. But all in all, I believe there are many use cases that can be repeated, and that's open up the market for the carriers between ports, manufacturing, and mining. Like the intersection of those, for example, machine vision will help. AGV control is also can be repeated. So
Yes.
that's a very quick summary on the monetization.
I mean, it's really helpful, Mohammed, because you touched on a few things, and it will help accelerate our discussion here, because I think we have about 5 minutes left before we open to Q&A, and I wanted to cover and get your views on one or two more points. But you right there, you covered enterprise digital innovation in the specific industries, and you also covered scale and replication, that the technologies used in those industries are applicable across a wide variety of industries at scale, which is very important for service providers. We did have a little discussion scheduled on technology, but I'm going to tuck that into the discussion about Huawei's strategy. We want to wrap up on for the last 5 minutes. I'm told that Huawei will continue to increase R&D investment. So last year was the first of many where R&D will be a major focus to continue to develop innovative products and services for digital transformation. So the question for me is, I guess, how do you see, number one, technology with standalone and non-standalone having an impact on the opportunity, and also kind of partnership models that and Andy referenced, because I think we keep hearing 5G is about an ecosystem in order to deliver those 5G to be services to industries. So I'm going to start maybe with Andy, and then Mohammed, if you want to chip in, please do. But I'd definitely like to leave time for Will to give his perspective also. So quite a mouthful there, but please go ahead. Maybe Andy, you want to take it first?
Yeah, I think when you look back at the history of the evolution of wireless, you see a lag time in deployment in a lot of places, and I think the sharing of use cases, for example, at Mobile World Congress, the greater understanding that carriers have of the limitations of 5G compared to what 5.5G can mean, but the importance of technology to make it easier and more affordable for the carriers to be able to bring access of the highest quality to their customers, and they can monetize that higher quality. So the importance of the technological innovation is critically important, and I think a recognition that the inability of 5G to provide the full bandwidth, quality, and energy efficiency that is possible under 5.5G, I think is going to help spur a greater focus, because there is an industry-wide consensus of the importance of moving to 5.5G, and we'll see some more specifications of that in the next year or two.
Well, it's interesting because you mentioned 5.5. I mean, we refer to as 5G advanced, and I'm just wondering, some of the things I've heard is operators saying, well, we're not sure we're going to invest heavily in 5G advanced quite yet because the business case isn't there. We're still not 100% convinced. I mean, I think to some degree it's inevitable, but you know, Mohammed and Will in particular, I'd love to get your view on 5G advanced and operator appetite for that, and Mohammed, your view of the potential for that as well. In case if they don't face forward and don't embrace it, what are some of the implications?
Well, I guess I'll jump in there, Evan. So, you know, from my perspective, I mean, you really have to look at the region, right? And there are some parts of the world, I think, you know, all of our panelists have accurately pointed out, that are further along in their journey with just getting 5G new radio release, you know, 18 deployed. And that comes down to this whole notion of non-standalone and standalone. And just real quickly, non-standalone is sort of the tweener. Allows you to go update the RAN, then come back and update the core. Once you have core and RAN that are 5G enabled, that really unlocks a true promise of 5G. That also gets you to network slicing, which gets you to, you know, those monetization opportunities, which in my opinion, 90% of those opportunities will be in the enterprise. That's the subject of our webinar. But you know, more importantly, you know, I can't underemphasize the need for partnership. And I'll provide one example, and I just want to kind of make a broad, you know, kind of statement and then hand it back to Mohammed and Andy. But I recently had the opportunity to speak with the Greek government, and we were talking about how they are stimulating their economy and how 5G is a big part of that. I wrote a Forbes article. You can look that up, look me up at Willtown Tech if you want to read that. But it was really innovative. What they have done with their spectrum auctions is they set aside a percentage for a fund that's going to fuel innovation. And so, we've been talking about Huawei, increasing its investment in R&D, and that is great. But there's more to it. There's this private-public partnership that can occur to really drive innovation and potentially, we don't even know. I mean, we've talked about mining, we've talked about manufacturing automation, but if we all remember, in a 4G LTE world, no one saw that ride-sharing disruption occur, and we got that with consistent connectivity with 4G and with highly accurate GPS capabilities. So, instead of going because I think Mohammed and Andy have done a great job of really kind of double clicking into the use cases. I think I just wanted to make and close with a broad statement around. I think, partnerships are important, but I think we can be innovative in the way that we go about those partnerships. And that example with the Greek government, I think, is something that could be replicated in the rest of the world.
Yeah. Sure. So I know you wanted to end here, Evan, but I wanted to use 1 minute to answer your question because I think it's a key question about Huawei investment when it comes to technology and future technology. So look, I think we look now at there is a digital trigger right now that really is, it's going to help and it's going to influence the whole society and influence even digital economy and influence business opportunity for carrier. This is done by compute in terms of AI and also connectivity. So for that, we see that in the next few years, 5G advance and also the diversified AI applications will really trigger a big wave of transformation. And we're talking about 10 times capability that 5G advance will bring in terms of the uplink speed, 1 gigabit per second, in terms of positioning accuracy, 1 centimeter, and in terms also of the latency. Add to that the great opportunities in the passive IoT and the combined communication and sensing. I think great opportunity. We always say 10 times capability will bring 100 times opportunity. So that's where Huawei is investing right now in terms of R&D. We are engaging the whole industries, all of the stakeholders, and we believe that the next few years will bring tons of opportunities to everyone, not just for Huawei or operators.
Well, on that note, which is very positive, thank you very much, Mohammed, Will, Andy, and Shirley, for your participation as panelists. We have received some audience questions, and if you don't mind, as we move to Q&A, I would just like to pose one of the questions, which I think is highly relevant. And we have a question as follows, which is, do you see any challenge of end device availability and end device interfaces, for example, in manufacturing, mining, ports, et cetera, and the interop between kind of OT devices and telecom network devices, so operational tech and telecom network devices? And we've heard a lot in terms of 5GPN and others in terms of is the device ecosystem ready, the sensors, the modules, et cetera. So given you guys on the panel, what's your view on that particular challenge? Are we well on the way to overcoming that, or do you think it's still something significant that might be hindering the market's development? I'm hoping one of you will volunteer.
I was going to defer to one of the Huawei panelists.
I can. Well, I think it's ecosystem is always key for widening the use cases and also propelling the business for everybody. And from Huawei perspective, what we really do is that we have in every region or not in every country, we hope that we have in every country, but for every region, we have an open lab that we gather. We use like the ecosystem suppliers, similar suppliers in China, and this kind of connection to build the local ecosystem in each region and, in the open lab to certify these kind of terminals. And I think the more these terminals are certified, the more they can be quickly get deployed So we have kind of a catalog for everything. Like, for example, if the operator wanted like AGVs or wanted like AI camera or whatever certain piece that will be deployed underground, of course, all of that in the catalog. And I think right now, I do not see a lot of challenges as far as the use case is generic as as it is deployed.
I think in the area of open source, I think Open Harmony, similar to Google's Open Android, and we build our Harmony operating system on top of Open Harmony. Open Harmony is all about interconnectivity of devices and encouraging developers. The Internet of Things, all the interconnectivity of devices, an open platform like Harmony is a great way to have the kind of connectivity that you're asking about.
Yeah, and I'll just add to what Andy said. What I'm seeing emerge is, not only from Huawei, but, the other traditional cellular infrastructure providers really addressing the need for exposing APIs to facilitate that developer community to innovate faster on the 5G platform. Because at the end of the day, it's not about the 5G technology, it's about the outcomes and use cases that we've been talking about on this webinar.
Indeed. I have one other question that I'd like to ask you, and actually, Will, since you've just finished talking, I'll make you keep talking. There was a lot of discussion here on industries, and obviously Huawei has a focus on, at least in this webinar, we talked a little bit about some of the traditional industries. In your view, across all industries, which ones stand to benefit most from 5G? It's still early on, but your perspective would be most welcome.
Yeah, so I'm not going to go vertical with this answer. I'm going to be broad, and in my estimation, just based on my research and spending time with with customers that are going down this path, and given the fact that operational technology environments have been a mishmash of connectivity modalities in the past, and there's been a lack of standard harmonization, although the latter is changing and coalescing. At the end of the day, I believe the largest addressable market for 5G within the enterprise is very broadly around manufacturing automation. And why that's so important, and I'll speak to the US's perspective, is that we are reshoring and we are onshoring a lot of our manufacturing back stateside. We are also investing in semiconductor production. And so I live in Austin, Texas. Samsung, just right down the road from where I live, is spending $17 billion to build a fab. TSMC is building a fab in Arizona. Intel announced its fab in the Midwest. And all of this is going to be critical automation, and Shirley spoke to this at the very beginning of the webinar, to make this all work. And 5G can be that connective tissue that accomplishes that.
Yeah. If I can quickly address your question, Evan, about that, what industry or enterprise will benefit the most? I think the industry or the enterprise that has more desire to transform, it will benefit the most. And at the same time, the industry or the enterprise that the operator really has in-depth understanding and has the right organization, it will for sure benefit that enterprise. But I believe that the values are already there to capture. It's just that we need to do our homework in terms of the offering.
Fantastic. Well, we are just about 1 minute short of the end, and I would like to just thank the panel for your amazing contributions. Mohammed, Shirley, Will, and Andy. I think it's been a really, really fascinating discussion, and one that was wide-ranging and also very open, and one that was open and honest about Huawei's position, its challenges, but also its strategy, its outlook for the future, and some of its successes in 5G2B. And what can be learned from that, what can be broadened out globally, and what opportunity 5G has to digitize global economies, including those that are not very digital now and are underserved now, such as in Africa and other regions of the world. So it's been very enlightening for me, and I'd like to thank you for that. I believe, Andy, you might have had a couple announcements at the end specific to how attendees can get access to the annual report and also the analyst summit that's happening right now. Is that correct?
Yes, and let me sneak in a plug that I think when we talk about the role of America in these efforts, we have to do a much greater job of training the American workforce to have the skills necessary for the semiconductor and innovation generally. So folks who are interested in reading the Huawei 2022 annual report, you can go to the resource list widget on the webinar platform, or you can go to huawei.com. Also, if you're interested in more about these technologies, this week, the Huawei Global Analyst Summit 2023 will be held April 19 to 20. That's China time, so it's coming sooner than otherwise. And that's going to be in Shenzhen, China. The theme of the HAS is Thrive with Digital, Striding Toward the Intelligent World. And you can visit Huawei.com to find access to more information about the Huawei Global Analyst Summit.
Thank you, Andy, and thank you, everyone. And thank you very much to the audience for listening. We hope you found it valuable. And on that note, have a wonderful afternoon, evening, or morning, wherever you are. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Evan.
Thank you.
Thank you all.